study UFOs, they're basically like halfway between that dimension, the dimension of thought, halfway between the physical dimension. But in that state, you have all these psychic experiences.
Welcome to Basis 32, Message from a Bottle, featuring Joshua Patrick from Vancouver, Canada, interviewed by Miles Johnston, producer and researcher of the Underground Video UK Basis series. Josh reviews the psychological literature of trauma and extraterrestrials or flying saucers, wherein a person's psyche is traumatized in youth to create a split personality which retains the original abilities at that time of traumatization. In childhood, this includes the powerful theta brain state, magical thinking and belief systems that, in a holographic concept of reality, can produce magical effects within the mind's eyes of yourself and other people because it acts as a psychic portal. Josh reviews his paper, Extraordinary Magical Beliefs and Their Personal and Social Exchange Value, Flying Saucers and Extraterrestrials as Archetypes of Social Unrest and Inclination for Human Evolution, as projected research, with the history and context of such metaphysical belief systems and their operability in light of the substantial amount of alien UFO evidence and experiences. Josh reviews his own psychic subconscious vision of being a clone, hybrid, or PGLF in a deep state of hypnosis, as triggered by James Casbolt's hypnotic speech patterns and directed psychic vision from Basis 4.
So let's take Basis 32. Hello, Josh.
We are in the final days of the Avondale Suite, leaving here in about a week, and we are with Josh and the lovely Jane. And you're from some provincial territory of the British Empire called Canada.
Yes, that's true.
And what brings you to the Basis 32?
Well, I have traveled from Vancouver, British Columbia, and I'm staying here in London with friends, Janine, Tyler, and Randy, which are World Club. And
What's World Club?
It's an electronic music band.
Oh, right, okay.
That are hitting up the city, playing lots of shows, recording music here. So they've graciously let me stay with them for the past week. I'll be here one more week.
Good.
And I'm a human being. We can get that out of the way.
Yeah.
And I'm a master's of counseling psychology student.
Right. Now, why did you say you're a human being? That's important, isn't it?
Well, I was born in Vancouver, BC. And it's important to the topic we're talking about, because we're talking about how the levels of this phenomenon integrate.
Now, just let's position yourself as to who you are. You've got a connection with Project Camelot, is that right?
Yeah, I helped out transferring the old website into the new website design, and that was about a year ago or so.
Right.
And at that time, I watched all the Camelot films. And
Now, this is serious. You actually watch the films. If you watch all those things, that's pretty.
yeah,
wow.
there's quite a few hours. And yeah, at the time, I was a master's student of intelligence analysis. So I was.
What does that mean, a master's student in intelligence? What sort of things are you covering to in that?
Well, the intelligence community, the purpose of it is so that tomorrow we'll wake up in a world that's roughly the same as it was yesterday. The intelligence community tries to keep balance, and that's what they've been doing for a long time. And also, creating intelligence is about taking a pool of information and synthesizing it down into a workable piece of intelligence that can be used for a purpose.
In other words, it means something you can understand.
Yeah, and it has a function for a project or a policy or ongoing operations or anything like that. So there's lots of law enforcement, drug control, idea control, political stability.
What do you mean by idea control?
That's a good question. Basically, I'm sure you know about the Brookings report in the, I think it's the 50s or so.
The late 50s, I think it was something which
Okay.
started NASA, that essentially,
Yeah.
if we told people about extraterrestrials, all social order would collapse and the whole place would
Yeah.
fall in around us.
So NASA did this big study to see what the implications of all the space technology would be. And they decided that coming into contact with other humans that may be millions of years ahead of us would introduce ideas and conceptions about who we are as humans and what we're doing here on this planet that would change the world. Like I said before, the intelligence community wants tomorrow when you wake up to be roughly the same as it was yesterday. If you had a belief system introduced into society that was highly evolved, the effects of that might be radically changing for the people and the citizens of the planet. And so
Now, would it? I think one of the big questions about the Brookings report is, would it be actually more harmful to the status quo of those in order, i.e., the religious community and the governments of the day, and the people probably would accept it just fine and get on with it, but maybe those particular social structures, that's what they're actually afraid of losing.
That's a good point.
I mean, I'm referring to the Fatima, Secrets of Fatima, where some people are saying that the third secret means the dissolution of the Catholic Church and all that.
Okay, yeah.
Some people say that's happening now, but
Yeah, I mean, our belief systems have been changing with all this technology and all the world is uniting together and more connected. There's two sort of perspectives on what the globe is for. Maybe you'd call them the Illuminati's perspective, is that the Earth is an egg and that it's designed to produce seeds. So as humans, we are to go out into the universe as seeds and populate. That's one perspective. The other one...
I haven't heard that perspective before. Is that the Illuminati perspective?
I would say that's the intelligence community's perspective, in that most of our technology comes out of the military, I would say. Like the internet came from ARPANET, from DARPA. The chips in these computers may have come from special projects. But it's all military related, and so war is what's causing us to create these rockets, and those are potential systems to have the humans leave the Mother Earth, and survive into the cosmos. That's one perspective. And from that perspective, all this war and destruction of the planet is a means to an end. The other perspective is that the globe is a biological preserve, and that it's
Like Gaia, the Gaia.
Gaia, or the Garden of Eden, and that we were here to protect, and we are the ones who are to maintain and to keep the planet. And so these are two perspectives with different outcomes. One is that we want to stay on this planet and keep it well and healthy. The other one is, let's go out into space with our advanced technology. And I guess there's pros and cons of both with how those belief systems are used and the things that are justified because of them.
I think I think I would argue that those are both valid systems. If those who stay on the Earth, you're going to need a nice Earth to live on.
Definitely.
But obviously, if you're going to send people into the upper skies, as we can hear from Heathrow, then that would, it's not a fault, it's a feature.
Definitely a feature.
That we need both, really.
Yeah.
So are you saying that the intelligence community is sort of balancing those two things?
I would say so, and it's highly compartmentalized, and every compartment has a different justification of what they're doing and why they're doing it. I don't think that you have to do destruction to create these technologies, but it is a route to them, and
it's a way of short-circuiting the so-called democratic process. Where I mean, in this country, we can't even have a train from London, a high-speed train from London to Birmingham or Manchester. It takes years, and we can't even add another runway to the airport here. But with war, you get things done a lot quicker and a lot in a much faster time scale.
And people are willing to make compromises in their life that change things for the positive and the negative. And so I am a Master of Counseling student, like I said, and I wrote last few months, I wrote a paper that's quite extensive about all the different dimensions of this phenomenon and the history, and how the different perspectives that you take on this phenomenon, how those different perspectives change the conclusions that you come to, and how almost the route in which you're taking has been compartmentalized in this system that we're talking about. So from every different angle gives a different story almost, and that's sort of what we're working on workshopping today, is having the physical domains and the spiritual or the consciousness domains unite and exist holistically, so that one side isn't at war with the other. And
I mean, we have a dilemma here, that we have the what I call the flat earthers. The flat earth scientific community is developing transhumanization technology to take a record or a version of all brain activity and stick that record, or shall we say mimic it or copy it into a technological brain, and you then have a cyborg. And they're then going to call a human entity.
Yeah.
But then there's the spiritual regard, where they believe that the essence of a human being is a spiritual thing and another dimensional existence, so to speak. And you can't put that into a cyborg, robot, mechanical brain.
Well, I would question that I would say you could project what you have onto that. And I think DARPA's new Avatar project, that's what they're doing.
That's the Avatar project that's related to the 2045 agenda.
I think so.
There's a website called 2045.com which mentions the Avatar project.
I don't know much about that. because DARPA just gives you the project abstract just a little bit so that they can tell you where your money's going to for some of the projects. And another bit about me is I'm a certified hypnotist, and I've done a lot of studies in the theory of the mind and accessing in deep states of trance in theta wave, which is very key for what we're talking about today.
Okay.
So,
now, could you explain what these waves are, so somebody who doesn't understand what these waves are? The alpha, beta, theta, etc.
I think right now we're in an excited beta state when your eyes are open. You're cruising along, you're having nice ideas. Your consciousness is up here usually in this state. Once you close your eyes, your brain waves will automatically start to slow down and go into alpha. Once you're in alpha, it's called using coherent linear thought. That's what hypnosis is. And you can have somebody else bring you down by having you deep breathe for a while and desensitize yourself from everything that's happening, and then counting down deeper and deeper. And your brain will go down into a theta wave pattern, which is more like deep waves. And your consciousness follows along. And instead of being really analytical and cognitive, it's more etheric and spiritual. And in this state of theta wave, you have I'd say different abilities of consciousness than you do in an alpha wave. These abilities are not possible in an alpha wave state, such as what they call past life regressions. What I believe is happening is your subconscious mind is connecting to, well, you see, it's like almost seeing or sensing another person's experience outside of time almost, and it's not coming from up here, it's being fed in almost like a movie of sorts. And it's like the movie Being John Malkovich when you're in somebody else's head.
Yes, I remember that, yeah.
So in hypnosis, they call it a past life vision.
I think in that movie, a person's able to dream and they are always inside John Malkovich's
in John Malkovich's head.
Yes.
What happens, they push away a filing cabinet in this floor between a floor, and it takes you through a portal into his head. That's what would be called directed past life recall. Whether it's your past life or not, that's up for debate about your personal views. It could be a window, an emotional window, that you're seeing something that has like an emotional bond between you and this other person. Or you could say it's your spirit that lived a past life. Or if you believe, like the Buddhists, that we're all one spirit, it would make sense that we're all past lives of each other.
Is that gene memory? Is it in our genes?
That's another point. Is it genes that are being awakened?
If you have a heart transplant or some other part of an organ from somebody else, you start seeing and feeling their genes. Or
it remembers
what that dream was.
So things like epigenetics, we haven't really studied what it does and how that functions so much yet.
What's epigenetics?
Well, you have the DNA spiral. Epigenetics is the finger that's turning on and off the switch. And so if you have a gene for like an eye color, you can use epigenetics to turn that color on and off. I've got blue eyes, so I have 2 blue genes. But if you have like a blue gene and a brown gene, theoretically you could create an epigenetic drug or a switch that would go in there and that change the epigenetics, and the epigenetics would turn on the DNA.
I mean, I have noticed there are some people with a brown eye and a blue eye.
So the big secret is that when you go down into deep hypnosis, you have ability to turn on and off these genes. And so with all these messages that are coming in, they're trying to get the message from the outside into the deep part of yourself so that it can have an effect on your spirit and your physical body.
Does that mean that you could end up actually inducing transhumanization or shape-shifting at a certain level of consciousness?
I think so, and
I mean, in other words, is the effect pretty well instant?
that's a good question. Like, when you're in that state,
you could actually
you
physically
triggered.
change your body by changing the DNA, or switching your DNA on.
Yeah,
certain
I
consciousness
think
state.
the switch could be instant, and the effects that would happen. Most biology is a balance between one enzyme on, one enzyme off, and so if you turn the switch on, then your body's just going to start to morph. About all like the shape shifting, I think that's potentially you're going up into your spirit body, and essentially I believe you are the center of the universe, and so when you're in that etheric body, you can change it and it will change how you are changing.
Does that mean that you have to change your light body, which will then manifest in the lower crystalline state of your physical body?
That's a good point.
In the same way that Lynn McTaggart's field showed that you have a light body, and then cells will regenerate and repair to the image of the light body.
Yeah.
Some people, I think, Lyndon, I think, has Biden. I think, I'm not sure of the name of the. If, in other words, cancers are created because you have toxins in your body which emit more light than your light body cell does, and therefore the cells don't know what pattern to follow, and then they misform. And it's the light body which governs the physical body.
Yeah, and that's the great paradigm that we're coming to. Because of humans' abilities in this theta state, it's not talked about widely. Society wants to keep you in a beta state with all the advertisements yelling at you. That's designed to go into your deep brain but keep you up here. And so when people are constantly arguing back and forth about how things actually are, they're just always in this state of mind, and they never get to experience the richness of the theta state, which is right before delta, which is why so many of these states are experienced between waking and dreaming. It's because you're coming in and out of the theta as well.
So just to explain again, you get alphas when you're asleep, basically.
Beta is with your eyes open and you're talking.
Yeah.
It's going fast. Pick, pick, pick. Alpha is when you close your eyes and it just starts to slow down. And then theta is the state which you want to target for remote viewing and hypnosis and past life recall and telepathy and psychokinesis and all these states. When we were talking about James Randi, when he's so critical of you, they keep you in that frontal state, so you're not even you can't do a psychic feat in front of them because you're not.
So that's a technique they use in order to disprove that psychic material works.
Definitely. Because if you're not in theta, and you have to be relaxed to go into theta, you don't have the abilities that you do. And when you're in beta state, you don't have the same analytical abilities, such as creating a story or analyzing a subject or integrating knowledge. So we really need to develop a perspective of the theta state. And psychology would tell you that perhaps everything experienced in a theta state is from your imagination. Anybody who says it's your imagination hasn't done their homework. Because if you've done your homework, you know that synchronicities and all sorts of unexplainable events will start to happen. And if you have a belief system that incorporates things like aliens, then the possibilities are endless because you're willing to accept all sorts of things that other belief systems would limit. Other belief systems will directly limit your ability to go into theta.
So the design of those belief systems is to restrict your consciousness from going to places in the first place.
Yeah, because it tells you that that is just your imagination, and that's it's not real. I would say it's more real on a higher resolution, on another level, because it incorporates the emotional level. That's the gateway, I believe, to the aethers or the ethers or hyperspace or whatever you want to call it. That
Now, does that mean that you're actually actively generating those things for your own consciousness because you've got a higher level and a wider imagination or a wider knowledge base? You're still actually inside your own consciousness field. You're not actually physically traveling, are you?
Yeah, your physical body may not be traveling.
I'm referring to the your physical bioelectric or bioenergetic field or energy is still within that sub-universe of your perception.
Like you're always the center of the universe. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, but it's because your own mind has been able to expand to other possibilities. Are you actually connecting to those other possibilities, or are those possibilities merely just your imagination?
I would say that those dimensions are eager to connect with us. And I would say that they manifest to us in ways that are acceptable through our belief systems, which is...
So I'm thinking of Da Vinci's thing where God and the lightning bolt creates man or starts man off. Those other dimensions are trying to communicate with us.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you mean by another dimension? Are you talking about a consciousness field, or what's your definition of another dimension?
I would say it's the consciousness field. There's so much research by other people talking about how our neurological circuits hook up to consciousness. And apparently from studies like remote viewing, the entire experience of the whole cosmos is accessible to you through subtle channels if you know how to retrieve the data.
And when you refer to subtle channels, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. Remote viewing was created so that you could stay in a talking state. I guess it was based on Scientology's protocols, so that you can access the deep theta waves without going into like a deep trance like that. And so,
in other words, you could tell somebody else what you're experiencing.
Yeah, you can retrieve the information with things like you would call astral projection or spirit travel. The information in a theta wave, this is another skill of theta, you have experience in all these different states, but once you come back up to alpha, like a dream, those images and visions will fade very quickly. And that's a designed mechanism into our brain, I believe, to protect us from maybe all the amazing stuff that's going on. If we knew that we're constantly having meetings and talking with people and having emotional connections in our dreams at night, like having a deep emotional connections with anybody that's traumatic, and you have to go to work in the morning, you can't deal with that, so your cognitive mind will just push that stuff out.
I think this is something that John Irwin refers to.
Okay.
Have you seen any of his
yeah, I watched a little bit of one of his.
I think what he's
your interview with him.
What he's referring to is what he's referring to is the ability to align the inner eye, the third eye, with what you then see on the conscious level, and be able to get those two to work together.
Totally, and it takes a stable personality, and you have to get over the is it real, is it fake dialogue, which people quickly do. But it also takes getting over almost the fear of integrating into these states, because it will change you and it will change your personality and who you are as a person and who we are as humans. But what's important and what we are working on today is how to stay a happy, healthy, productive person, and how to be able to manifest your spirit or what your purpose or what you want to do in life, and still regard what maybe society would call a magical belief system or an extraordinary belief system, or someone maybe they would even call you crazy. Or how do you function in reality like that?
So this is a way of usefully experiencing these wonderful experiences and translating them correctly in a useful way in ordinary three-dimensional so-called reality.
Yeah, and how to not only accept that they exist, but to harness their energy within your life with purpose and value. Whereas this scientific worldview says that this is not a source of information, but when you look a little bit deeper, you find out that so much of our information comes out of that. So it's how do you, like we're talking about, channel it through a belief system that has been purposely created so that you won't be able to make the deeper connections. Because when you make the deeper connections, you find out that going to work from 9 to 5 to pay your gas bill for the rest of your life may not be fulfilling your life's purpose to the degree as if you were working a job so that you can do something to have meaning and value.
Many of the great geniuses have gone into that kind of a state to come up with the wonderful new ideas about where they've got inventions and things.
Yeah, and so much of chemistry came directly out of that, because of alchemy is accessing these trance states and accepting that we are the center of the universe and that the outside world and that the inside world are one. Once you've accepted that, the changes that you see in your chemical dish can represent the changes of consciousness inside of your mind, and so you can ascend the ethers that way. And so, like, the guys, Francis Crick and James Watson, they're doing a lot of LSD when they figured out the double helix structure. And
did their consciousness actually experience the DNA? Did they actually go down there inside it and see it?
Yeah, I think probably. And the guy who figured out the buckyball, I think he figured that out in a dream of sorts. And so it seems like the intuition that maybe you call your higher self or your spirit, or is trying to communicate with each and every one of us, and that learning to listen to it is a skill that has to be developed.
But up until fairly recently, you'd get burned at the stake for even thinking like this. I mean, the great Isaac Newton was in fact an alchemist, but he was able to make that jump. And still, but only a few years before that.
And we harvested all his great inventions and all his ideas, like Newton's, the physical laws of matter or whatever. And his family was nice enough to burn all his metaphysical manuscripts so that they wouldn't
get him into trouble,
contaminate the society's belief systems. So if we knew that all these geniuses were in touch with something that is perhaps elusive and perhaps unclassifiable by science, our whole venture of the Western world, of the scientific endeavor, would come into question, and that might change the direction of where we're going. Remember we talked about the egg and creating the seeds. That might change the direction. If you can travel out into the galaxies as a spirit, science might...
Well, we've in my former role as a videographer at the AMMACH project, we had a particular individual who described certain laws in this country where if you do what you've just described, you are pretty badly, you're sectioned, and you can be gruesomely disfigured and killed. They do not want more people in the gene pool who can do that. It's just you're not allowed to leave this planet in your mind.
Yeah, and
doing so is a death penalty under the witchcraft laws.
Because, as you quickly find once you start going out that you get picked up by saucers pretty quickly. And it's quite different than what they want you to believe about that. So, what we've been talking about is the theta state mostly, and the cultural technologies that give access to the state, and the types of belief systems that come out of this, and how people integrate these experiences and abilities that are outside of normal, everyday social accepted abilities. And so where we've gotten this knowledge, it's mostly come from occult magic, and on the one hand, and ritual magic, and on the other hand, with hypnosis. And hypnosis is developed into hypnotherapy, which is used mainly for pain management and phobias, and you can
stopping smoking and something like that, or
habits, and if you want to go back to a memory that you've had in your life, or even past life recall, these sorts of things. The question is how do you integrate a past life memory or a vision that you've had into your life? Was it my past life? Was it another life that I have an emotional connection to? Or was it just something that I was given a glimpse into? I think it's very important how we integrate the knowledge of the theta state into our belief systems, because if you're constantly trying to convince everybody that what you experienced was real, they're going to have resistance, and they're going to just say, no, that's not real, you're crazy, put up resistance. The effects that's going to have on you is you're going to form trauma in your mind. And what we've discovered is the more trauma you have, the more you can disconnect from your physical body, the more you're able to access the astral levels. So if you have a belief system that's completely the antithesis to normal everyday society's belief system, you'll have a lot more abilities in theta state.
And that's been exploited in
has
MK
been
Ultra and AMMACH
exploited.
programs.
Yeah, and
A Manchurian candidate.
So, what we are talking about workshopping is what is the value of expressing my experiences to somebody else? What's the value of trying to convince somebody who doesn't believe in aliens or extraterrestrials? And what's the value of trying to overcoming their resistance? I looked at that from a psychological viewpoint, and I created a 40-page project proposal that would theoretically integrate the spiritual or consciousness level with the physical domains, so that people are able to more accept and utilize these human abilities and operate within society and not be considered absolutely crazy.
But it has to be said in the basis research and the AMMACH project research that has been specifically being used as a tool to get people who can go into that state and put them into certain mental hospitals so they can be experimented on or damaged in some way.
And the more trauma you inflict on somebody, the more directly they're able to access those states.
I mean, and on top of that, it's been specifically, Kathy Morgan's research has found that they've specifically written those trauma state issues and symptoms, and they've actually put it in the medical journals and manuals, so that if you are suffering from those particular things, in other words, if somebody's inducing these kind of traumas and you're in the MK Ultra program itself, you can then these symptoms that you suffer from as a result of those programs, they can use as technical means of saying you are actually technically insane and can therefore section you.
And you are delusional, and you will have a dissociative identity disorder. And once you've bought into the fact that they're the expert and they're the ones who have your answers, then you're going to be co-opted and used for how they want you to. And apparently, a lot of this that's going on is subconscious. People are being used outside of their awareness. And I question the amount that these are physical experiences when you have a flashback or a memory recall. I would say maybe it's more etheric or based on consciousness, something like that. But the paper is called Extraordinary Magical Beliefs and Their Personal and Social Exchange Value. Flying Saucers and Extraterrestrials as Archetypes of Social Unrest and Inclination for Human Evolution. What that title means is, when you are contacting and very concerned about these flying saucers and aliens, that is a deep system of the normal human process. That's a subconscious archetype that you need to evolve, such as society's crumbling. We need to evolve and create these UFOs as seeds to escape the mother, or your family system is in chaos, and so that's another way that's used, family trauma. That is a gateway to accessing these states.
It has to be noted that a lot of the people that have been involved in this kind of research do have family issues. They do have father issues, and they do have
traumatic history.
They have a common link in all this with that precise problem with family.
And so the two realms that we're dealing with, we watched the citizens hearing on disclosure the other night, and Stephen Bassett said this: there's cognitive dissonance within society between mankind facing the great unknown and the government's desire to stand firm. So the government wants to tell you that we're still living in a 1940s or 50s paradigm, and that we've figured out everything there is to figure out, and all we need is the fine details to put in. Like the Higgs boson, that was the last piece of the puzzle. That's the story of science. So there's this cognitive dissonance going on between people's actual experiences and what the government is telling you is what's happening, based on they want stability and control. That's the physical paradigm of it. And what I'd like to present now is a paper written from psychology. I just would like to read a couple paragraphs because they put it better than I ever can. This paper I'll provide the link for, and it's from counseling psychology schools and people who work with processing trauma and being able to re-enter your body and being present in the moment. The paper is called Unlocking the Secrets of the Wounded Psyche. And it's by Kalshed and CF. Nice names. So I just want to read 2 paragraphs or so. The last 20 years has seen huge progress in our understanding of the injured psyche. Inner space is opening to us in a way that is helping us heal the deep psychological wounds that many of us carry. Donald Kalshed has been exploring the archetypal dimensions of the trauma process. His interests arose out of his work as a Jungian analyst. Many of his clients got stuck in their therapeutic journey, or worse, they tried to sabotage it. He discovered a common thread amongst these clients in that most had suffered childhood trauma. That's key. And so he started to ask, what is it about trauma that leads people to sabotage the road to healing? What are the systems that come into play in order to help a child to survive psychological trauma? And how do these systems limit later development? His groundbreaking conclusion was that the psyche's internal response to trauma is to set up a defense system that through life will cause immense pain, but this defense system is also a survival system designed to save that person's life. And so it goes on to say, I'll just have a brief filler. When you're a child, your brain is basically in delta. That's why children have access to seeing ghosts and spirits. So if you experience trauma at a young age, it imprints that circuit, and you have basically a super portal to those abilities.
And that's why we have so much child abuse going on.
Mm-hmm. And that's
one of the reasons
theoretically why they would do ritual magic ceremonies to children, is to traumatize them at a young age with magical imagery so that can be reused at a later time. And this is creating splits in consciousness. This is what the paper
in this
goes
country,
through.
there's a thing called the Alien Pod program in schools, where children go to school in England and they're told there's an alien pod has crash landed in their school.
Yeah.
And they're not allowed to tell their parents about this. And they're traumatizing the children with this alien pod.
Yeah, that creates a secret little pocket of trauma that later on with triggers you can re-enter that, and all those abilities that have been solidified through that trauma are going to be there to be used.
Again, that's Kathy Morgan's work, and one of her grandchildren was involved with that program.
Okay, this goes on to say that
is this little alien you've got on your thing, is that from the film
it's
one
a
of the
Pokemon.
Oh, it's Pokemon. Oh.
This is Mewtwo. He's a genetically modified Pokemon. He used ancient Pokemon DNA, genetically modified, so that he could come back to life and be the Pokemon battle creature master. But they couldn't contain him in a Pokeball, so he lives out in the spiritual aethers. Okay, this is the key point about archetypes that people need to understand, because these are the building blocks of psyche. An archetype is like a subconscious symbol, like a mother or a king or a dragon, and they have great substance in the deep psyche. So it says that archetypal energy is typical of all human psychologies. It is rooted deep in the unconscious, and it is archaic, primitive, and not easily assimilated by the conscious mind. It can be luminous or dark, angelic or demonic, but because it exists in a raw, unmediated form, it tends to be overpowering. It is as though the archetypal system are charged with 440 volts, and in order to integrate into a conscious human ego, the 440 volts needs to be transformed into a more manageable 220 volts. If archetypal energy is not mediated, it can't be integrated into ordinary day-to-day life. And then when this unconscious energy is activated, it can knock the ego out so that the person effectively becomes possessed by it. So it says, because archetypal energy is located deep in our unconscious, the psyche's way of bringing it into the consciousness is to personify it. Characters in myths and fairy tales portray archetypes or unconscious imagination projections of human beings like royalty and sporting legends. And it goes on to say dreams and fantasies, and it goes on to talk about aliens and the wise old man and flying saucers and evil angels and devils and statues and extraterrestrials, terrorists. What they're saying is that this energy that's been activated through trauma and the splitting of the consciousness has these archetypes, which are spiritual, I would say they're spiritual building blocks of the psyche that are being experienced and interpreted by the cognitive mind as aliens or as reptiles or as flying saucers or as this or that. This is what the trauma psychology school is saying. This is how they're explaining all these experiences, is that they are unconscious experiences of images.
So does that mean that they're looking for a trauma situation that happened in a child's life?
Yeah, and that's
then using that as a means of explaining it away?
That's a key, and that once you found the trauma, they believe that that explains away the experiences. I would say that the experiences may not be created by that, but that you are given access and you are experiencing them, because when you're physically traumatized, your spirit goes, it flies away because you don't want to.
So you're saying that these things that they're experiencing is actually real, whereas the established order is saying that it's a delusion?
Yeah, the establishment says that it's caused by the trauma and that it would be a delusion of an archetype. I would say that the archetype has real substance and it's on a plane that has a higher resolution than the physical plane. And that's why when you have one of these experiences, nobody can tell you that it didn't happen, because it's almost more real. It has depth to the meaning. It has psychological imagery, and it has connection with weird events. And so
there's a movie called I Know What I Saw. And that's how they're using it to explain. The witnesses are saying, "I know what I saw." Mm-hmm. Is that what you're saying now?
Yeah. Well, what I'm saying is that what you see and experience is limited by your belief system. If you think that aliens are going to be nasty, horrible creatures, that may be your experience of a dimension that is multi-compartmentalized and has many components. And the way you physically see them may manifest in a way that makes sense to your mind. And so the surprising thing is that the experiences have so many similarities. That's the part that is hard to explain away, is why all the same, why do they always look the same? Why do they operate in similar manners, and why is it similar themes happening?
Is that because of television, or being fed these illusions first and then we see them in a group mind? 100th monkey effect? Possibly,
or possibly there is something that's going on that our cognitive mind interprets in similar ways.
It's something that we noticed with some of the encounters with greys in Northern Ireland was that people were seeing a different skin colour to the greys. They were seeing different subtle details which were not available in the public domain. Whereas people who said, well, I've just seen a typical grey, they maybe not actually seen it, but maybe they've had an experience which makes them think they've seen it. So different.
Yeah, I would say when they're in a etheric state, then your mind filters it down so that it appears as like a physical being, and their crafts can manifest in between the dimensions. But the subtle differences are in our cognitive ability to sort of make sense of something that's happening of a higher order and experience it almost in our senses. Why this is all important is because the differences that are going on are created because there is, I would call it a schizophrenic, or it's the cognitive dissonance between what's actually happening and what your social programmed mindset is happening. So your experience is going to be somewhere in between. And when your experience is something different than someone else's, too often people start to argue, and that is a gateway to become co-opted, I believe. And
in what way, gateway? To be co-opted by who or what?
I would say the programming about aliens is always about, do they exist or do they not exist? Once you're in the classified domain, the conversation about do they exist is over because they know they exist. So it's called like a false paradigm, in that as soon as you start to argue about something that makes one person right, one person's wrong, that conflict, I believe, has programming that's tied with all this alien stuff. Do I believe? Do I not believe? That system gets activated again, and these disagreements.
I mean, a belief is something that's not tangibly real.
Yeah. And
whereas
so,
if you've seen something, it's tangibly real. And the argument is that if they ask you, do you believe in aliens, it's a trick question. Because if you say, yes, I do believe in aliens, then they're automatically shifting you into this delusional state of, well, you're a wacko.
And that's, I think, the key. And that's all this programming that gets activated. So what we want to do is to be able to exist by accepting that theta state abilities and experiences may be experienced differently, but there's deeper, more coherent things going on that need to be synthesized together. So,
can you develop what those deeper things are?
Yeah, I think so. The first part is, one of your witnesses, Nina, was talking about getting over the fear. That's a very important point.
It's a sort of a fear elimination program, or confronting your demons.
Yeah, you have to face them. And if you're constantly feeding yourself, you think you're enlightening yourself by constantly being fed information about how the Illuminati controls everything, you're giving away all your power. So
the whole Illuminati construct is actually a trick?
I think it's a trick. It definitely exists. Like, it's the Illuminati. The Council on Foreign Relationship exists. The whatever.
Tavistock Institute.
Tavistock exists. McDonald's Corporation exists. That's where you're going to find the Illuminati. But the whole boogeyman in the closet, constantly fear about false flags and shootings, and you got to be afraid because of these horrible people.
So that's a consciousness management program itself.
Yeah, I think that's when you become aware, and then you get co-opted. And instead of offering these states and these abilities to enlighten your soul and enlighten your own life path, you use it to prove other people wrong. You say, you don't believe what I've experienced, so you're wrong. You're using it as a way to create friction. And so what we want to try to do is to be able to integrate it so that if I have differences of opinion as you, it doesn't really matter, because we have agreements on the deeper human things that we want to accomplish in life, which is building community and helping people manifest their purpose in life and what they want to do in life. And so I wrote this really long paper about all the different contextual perspectives on this phenomenon.
Why did you write this? What made you get involved to do this project?
I find once you believe in aliens, you almost get a confirmation bias. Like, you'll accept anything that fits into your belief system. Like you were saying, show me the proof, the evidence people want. There is no solid evidence unless these things manifest clearly to you, because it's happening in an etheric plane.
Well, one of the things, briefly, before we finish this section, is, I mean, we took Marika Ali and Joanne Summerscale to the UFO Congress this year, and to be scanned by implants at a period of time. But the other thing which was physically real was that under ultraviolet light, it's possible to actually see where some kind of beings have, grabbed hold of them.
Yeah.
And this was visible. I mean, this is a real thing. I mean, the implants, you can measure real.
You can see the effects,
this is a
the energy
effects.
effects.
You can actually see in magnetic field, B field, E field, and RF radiation fields of energy producing signals, pulse signals, or signals at various frequencies are coming, from individuals. And the same thing with the ICAT people, International Committee Against the Abuse of Covert Technologies, which is based in the States and in, I think, Europe and Australia. They're actually measuring things, readings off people.
The key part is, though, that it's energetically changing us. When these beings touch us, supposedly it changes the ultraviolet frequency light that's coming off of your skin. So perhaps it's activating you in different ways. What's important, though, is to not blindly accept anything that people tell you, because if what we're saying is true, then there is a lot of information that's provided out there that's false herring. So when you buy into it, it'll give you a little bit of working energy, but it'll come to a halt because there's intrinsic problems with it.